New All Too True Blue State Histories, Idaho. Excerpt from Satirical History of Idaho. Time immemorial. Nez Perce et al. Before Idaho was even named that, Idaho, the Nez Perce, Coeur d'Alene, Shoshone, Bannock, and other Indian tribes lived there. Also the boreal woodland caribou, grizzled bears, and bald-headed eagles. When those people and critters looked around, they saw scenes like this. 1805, Lewis and Clark passed through. In 1805, while making their way from Missouri to Oregon, the Lewis and Clark expedition passed through Idaho. To be more specific, they traversed Lemhi Pass, which is situated on the Montana-Idaho border. The term Lewis and Clark expedition is codified above because that wasn't the official name of that operation. In the world of bureaucracy, the group was called the Corps of Disco. This was because Lewis and Clark were the originators of disco, dancing, and music. They were at the core of that artistic movement, and they were considered to be very good at it. These hikers made the Bee Gees look like pikers, illustrating that they were better disco dudes than travelers. The photo makes clear that had they just waited a few years, they could have taken the train, rather than walking and canoeing all that way. 1832, Trappers' Rendezvous. The huge 1832 rendezvous of trappers, Indians, mountain men, and real estate agents at Pierre's Hole became known as the Rendezvous of 1832. This extended party, sort of like the Burning Man of the early 19th century, was held at the west foot of the Three Tetons in Teton County, Idaho. These large gatherings took place on a regular basis throughout the fur-trapping regions of the West, but the one in 1832 was at least one of the largest meetups ever held in the Rocky Mountains. The Indians and trappers, mountain men, arm wrestled, played cribbage, Scrabble, Monopoly, go fish, had pony races, pitched horseshoes, discussed philosophy and poetry, told jokes, and sat around the campfire singing John Denver songs, passing the pipe around, but not smoking it. They just passed it around, and everybody passed on inhaling the toxic fumes. A good time was had by all. Love and peace was in the air. Actually, it was more like Woodstock than Burning Man in some ways. Squeaking Lemmer must have been there, for he provides this memory of the occasion. Notice the Indians hugging each other in the bottom middle of the frame. It was a touchy-feely gathering. 1836, First Spuds. Idaho's license plate should boast about being the land of Napoleon Dynamite, but instead they pat themselves on the back for their famous spuds of all things. Everything must have its beginning. It was in 1836, 4 years after the Woodstock of the old far out west noted above, that Henry H. Spaulding grew the first spuds in Idaho, near the bustling metropolis of Lapwai. Here's what the first Idaho spud looked like. Finding it too unmeshable, unbakeable, unboilable, and unfryable, they later re-engineered it to be more kitchen-friendly. 1860 to 1863. Gold. There were 4 gold rushes in Idaho in the first part of the 1860s. In 1860 itself, the Clearwater Gold Rush came about when Humphrey Bogart, Clifford the Big Red Dog, and Captain Cook moved there from El Cerrito, California in immediately had several gold records. Born on the Boise, Bad Spud Rising, Run Through the Potato Patch, I Put a Spud on You, Who'll Stop the Flea Beetles, etc. The second gold rush was in 1862 and was called the Boise Basin Gold Rush. It was soon discovered that the spuds there were more plentiful and valuable than the gold, and the prospectors either skedaddled or took up the cultivation of spuds. Another gold rush that began in 1862 and lasted until 1864 was the Confederate Gulch Gold Rush. This was brought about when Confederate soldiers who had gone AWOL saw somebody with a gold tooth and tried to take it out of his head by main force. They finally were able to yank it out, but only after a struggle lasting the best part of 2 years. The final rush of the time period under examination was the Owyhee Gold Rush of 1863. This rush got its name from a disappointed prospector who, when he saw a rival had been the one to strike it, Richie claimed, "Oh, why he?" He thought it should have been himself that found the color. Here is the mining town where Creedence Clearwater Revival, alluded to above, wrote their hit songs. 1860. First organized town. The first organized town in Idaho was Franklin. It was founded in 1860 by Mormon settlers who thought they were in Utah. The Mormon community of Franklin and Cache Valley became the first permanent Euro-American settlement in Idaho. Toxic Lake in La Sawtooth is not especially close to Franklin, but it's much more scenic than Franklin, so for your viewing pleasure, here is a stereophonic recording of the wave ripples there. By the way, Toxic Lake is not really all that toxic. It was named that to discourage and keep out the riffraff tourists. 1861. Lewiston Incorporated. In 1861, Lewiston, named for Jerry Lewis, became Idaho's first incorporated town. Clarkton, named for Dick Clark, is across the state line in Oregon. Lewiston is at the confluence of the Snake and Clearwater rivers. This is how it looked back in 1569, according to the date on the picture. 1863. Massacre of 224 Shoshone. Only about 60 years after the Shoshone had aided, abetted, and assisted the Corps Disco, Very, in 1863, 224 Shoshone Indians were massacred after being attacked by the United States Army while camped at the confluence of Bear River and Battle Creek. As everybody knows, Battle Creek is in Michigan, birthplace of cereal foods and serial killers. So this is a very long confluence. It is easy to see from this portrait made at the time that the Shoshone felt no dread of the arriving army force and were caught completely unaware by the ensuing attack. 1863. Territoryhood. In 1863, Idaho was rewarded for finding gold and driving out the Indians by being made a territory. The new Idaho Territory was created out of extra bits of Washington and Dakota territories. In 1864, the Montana Territory was cut away from the Idaho Territory. Getting continually smaller, in 1868, a small part of Idaho Territory was transferred to the new Wyoming Territory. A Madison Avenue commercial artist was commissioned to make up a coat of arms for the new Idaho Territory. He made two mistakes. The first was, he thought Idaho was famous for onions rather than potatoes. His second mistake was, he didn't spell onion right. 1877. Chief Joseph and Nez Perce passed through. In 1877, less than 75 years after the Nez Perce had helped out the Corps Disco Very, one of their leaders, Chief Joseph, and his family and friends were chased all around the Pacific Northwest, including Idaho, by a bunch of soldiers who had gotten their ire and dander up because of the shellacking their boy George Strong Custer had gotten in Montana the year before. Here's the treasure map Long John Silver used to try to find the Nez purse.